All right, everybody, welcome to today's class, or class Educated Fed. We just came out of a class. That's why,
Always teaching somebody something.
we were teaching a big class here just recently. If you guys don't know, if you're first joining us, this is your first episode with us. I'm Alex Wellings. This is Kane Crawford. We're with FEAG. We are a group that obviously helps federal employees with their retirement benefits, but we've recently been doing this podcast. It's been going pretty well.
People are digging it so far.
People are digging it, and we kind of chose this because we do a lot of classes together across the country, educating folks on their benefits package and everything, but we rarely get an opportunity to talk about the things that are going on in the appointments and the current events that people are worried about and what's going on in the government and immediate updates. Because when we go and teach these classes, it's almost always, the administration or the agency wants us to talk about, tell us about FERS, tell us about TSP,
It's all about retirement readiness.
Yeah, it's just about the benefits. Rarely is it about the things that we really get into when we go to the appointments, which is like, hey, I'm specifically concerned about this thing that's going to happen down the road and how that might affect my benefits, and what are you hearing about that? And
what if I have to retire early? What if I want to go longer than they want? Whatever. There's always a variable.
And this is a great platform for us to do these kind of talks. So
we can pick and choose topics as we go here.
But so in the last episode, we were talking a lot about reduction in force. We were talking a lot about, what typically happens when those things happen.
Buyout, potential.
And the questions that came from me, I don't know what you got since that episode, but for me, a lot of those have been, that's great and everything, but now, and you're right, we should take advantage. We should come in for an appointment. We should sit down. That's why we're here. Tell us what we need to know, like what's the most important duck that we need to get in a row. And so I figure, we talk a lot about these things at our classes, which, if you're watching this and you ever want to attend one of those classes, we'll make sure anybody that watches this show has always an open invite to our classes that we put on each and every, we put them on monthly.
Sometimes twice a month, depending.
Yeah. And so you guys can always get an invite to that. But what are you going to say?
You just brought something up. I always say in the class, no two feds are alike.
So true.
And the response from the last
class
or webinar, even the last webinar, was total proof of that. People with the same concern.
Oh, from the last episode?
The last episode.
Oh, yeah.
People with the same concerns about maybe the RIFs or VEERs or whatever, but nobody had the same
story or reason why.
Right? I'm I just always have to remind myself. I say it in the class to you as a Fed. No two Feds are the same. Don't take advice from your cubicle mate or whatever, because your situations are so different. And then I got to remind myself that that's so true, because we talk about a general topic, and then I take 3 back-to-back phone calls from people that watched the episode and went, yeah, none of those 3 things are even remotely the same. One concern started the conversation, but nobody has the same reason or it's going to have the same result either. So it's good to know that we can walk you through your specific situation, but we have to at least talk like we do in the classes for hours, on a more specific basis.
I'm with you. I felt the same. I got a ton of people that were obviously worried about reduction in force, but mostly folks that were like, okay, here's my circumstance. If that happens, I'm not prepared for this thing.
Yeah.
One of the persons I was sitting down with was really concerned about their kids. They were just about to go to college. He's like, this could not be a worse time for me to have a job change or anything like that. Like, what protections do I have? That was their main concern.
Yeah.
And it started with like, okay, well, let's don't panic. Let's sit down. Remember, it's probably going to be a slow time, but let's get a plan together. I think it's going to be less of a concern than you think.
Yeah.
And we sat down, we did their whole analysis, kind of sat down and, what we always like to do, sit down and do a lot of expense work. So we sit down and say, okay, well, let's talk about your expenses, and real healthy exercise for everybody watching, but this is how we do it here. We focus on, what are your contributions? What are you making as far as savings contributions each month? You want to get a handle on how much you spend each month? Easy deduction here. Just think about how much you save. If you're not saving it, you're probably spending it. Right?
Exactly.
It's an easy
It's
little...
going somewhere.
Because when earlier in my career, all I would ever do is sit down and be like, all right, what's the mortgage? What's the car payment? What's this thing? And I'd budget it that way, right? But the thing is like, it never lines up exactly. You're like, wait a second, there's all these like little there's money gone. Like, we should have way more money left over. It's like, no, you're spending it on little things, and those little things add up. And so you want to get into good ideas, like how much money goes into the savings and the checking and brokerage accounts and your TSP and 401k if you're married or something like that, and they get a spouse that has something.
Yeah.
How much money goes into savings? Everything else is what we need to plan for.
Yeah.
And so we start to plan that way. And it's like, what can we expect from the pension? What can we expect from this? What can we expect from that?
And maybe
And what big expenses might come down the road, like this person had college
expenses, health care. I always get we're probably going to be good on cars. We've already just bought new cars, and so we could retire in the next couple of years and be fine for a while, right? Everybody's always worried because the expenses of cars are amazing these days. But I think to your point of how much are you saving, people always ask that question, how much should I be saving in TSP?
Oh, that's also a good one. I get that a little more.
Can you generalize that? I mean, I tend to, I think.
Yeah.
Because I just say, hey, the goal is the max. Like, realistically.
Max out
the goal would be the
matching.
maximum. Well,
no, max contribution.
See, I call that the minimum, right? Like,
yeah, that's
if you're putting 5%, I get people, oh, I'm maxing. Oh, so you're doing 30,000. They go, oh, no, I'm doing 5%.
No, I agree. Like,
really?
That's a lot of people come to me and say, I'm maxing out my TSP, and same kind of confusion. It's like, what do you mean by maxing?
There's been a lot of talk, financial advisors across the place, depending on what they're trying to sell you, only put, the match amount in your TSP or whatever your 401k is, whatever the employer's matching, that's all you should put in there. Well, when you understand what the thrift is, and in our class that we do, we talk about the smart money list, right?
Yep.
The TSP is as good a savings plan as there is.
I agree.
While you're working, right? That's the caveat. While you're working.
It's meant for that.
Yeah.
It's a thrift savings plan.
Yeah.
Not the thrift retirement plan.
Yeah, no,
right?
You're saving it for later.
It's the savings plan.
Tomorrow you is going to thank you. So to answer that question, I usually say the goal is the most you can put in there.
I agree.
Whether that's 5%, that's cool, but try to work that up.
Yeah. Yeah. Contribution limits this year went up.
It did, right?
By another $500. Not to mention that, did you see also
the Secure Act 2.0 stuff started kicking, right? If you're 60, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, if you're 60, now there's even more of a catch-up contribution.
It's like 11.5, I think, isn't it? I forget the number.
An additional, but what was weird about that? If you can pull it up while I'm saying this, maybe the contribution on that additional catch-up contribution. So if you're watching this and you don't know, you have your standard contribution that you can make. 22.5 or 23.5.
23.5.
23,500 this year, 2025. You can contribute $23,500 into your TSP if you're under 50. But if you're 50 or older, you could famously do this catch-up contribution, additional $7,500, right? $7,500 is a catch-up contribution, and then if you're age 60 to 63, you can go and do an additional higher catch-up contribution.
4 more thousand.
Of 11,250.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So, but my thing was, okay, but what about our 64-year-olds?
Yeah, right.
Right, like I got a ton of folks that are like 64. Does that mean that they can't do that anymore and they go back down to the 7,500?
That's
the rules
weird.
right
that's
now.
That's what it says.
That's the rule right now. I wonder how quickly that's going to change.
That might spin out once they figure out that people are doing it and people need to.
There's a lot of people in there that are trying to catch up for retirement, and for some reason in these 3 years,
there's
4
always
years,
some little weird caveat that, like, hey, this is a great thing, but we're going to limit the greatness.
Yeah,
and everything they do, right?
They're probably
if you make too much money, you can't do the Roth outside. Roth IRAs, like those are weird.
Outside,
those are weird little rules. But I think this goes back to the root question: is no matter how old you are, when you started your job with the government, put as much as you possibly can in savings. Like I said, budget after you've paid yourself. The old pay yourself first thing, right?
Yeah.
So I teach people, and this is kind of off topic for what we're probably going to talk about today, but I teach people a lot about switching from percentages. You probably heard me say this, to dollar amounts. Yep. And I've been amazed at the people that thank me, 2-3 years later, because I'm keeping in touch. I can't believe I never did that, but I'm actually hitting the max now.
You mean like they were putting in like 10%?
I'm doing 10%, and that's $387.43 a paycheck. Why would you just not round that to $400?
Yeah,
right? It's like
it's your money that you're saving for yourself.
So just round it,
right?
Take the percentage out, put the dollar amount in. We can talk about this one-on-one at some point. Put the dollar amount in, but then that gives you the ability to increase your contributions on not such a grand level. That makes sense. So if you're at 140,000 a year salary, 1%'s
Good
a
chunk.
bigger chunk,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But if I wanted to just increase it $50, and now I'm doing $850 instead of 800,
Right.
you'll never notice that $50 came out of your paycheck,
No, but you will over time.
right? And
Over
then
time, you'll notice it
see
in
it
your
on the other
retirement
side.
account, yeah.
But then the cool thing is 6 months later, bump to 900. You didn't notice it, and now you've changed it $100 a paycheck. I've had people go from the minimum to like $1,000 a paycheck within a year and a half, and they didn't even realize they had done it because they got maybe a step increase. They got they got the COLA that year, and they just kept systematically increasing that deposit. So again, off topic a little bit, but
you're not wrong. I mean, I think a lot of people have that mental hurdle of like, well, I've gotten accustomed to living on this money, and
I have
now
to have it
I'm
all.
going to have to give it back. And, they're not even spending it all. A lot of times I'm like, they're not spending it all. It's just going into checking and savings accounts. And it's like, well, what are you going to do with that? Well, I might invest it. And they end up putting it into a brokerage account sometimes, or they put it at their bank more often than not.
CDs or something.
Some bank rep calls them and says, hey, yeah, put it in this CD, or, you're with Bank of America, let's say, and the Merrill Lynch guy walks over to the desk and says, hey, you have all this money in checking and savings. Like, why aren't you putting it to work for you? And next thing you know, they've got a brokerage account or an IRA there. And I'm saying, well, shoot, you should probably be putting that in your TSP.
Yeah.
Not into some brokerage account outside of it. TSP is a really advantaged plan for you while you're working. You have a lot of options here, and people get a lot of crap with TSP with regard to the options of funds they have. But arguably, with the C fund, you've got like the most common index fund in the world. It's arguably the index fund that Vanguard was built around, the SMP 500 index fund.
The benchmark for everybody else.
Yes.
Your S&P 500 or your C fund.
That C fund has done fantastic.
I mean, think about the 500 most widely traded stock companies in the U.S.
Very well diversified.
Right?
Right.
You said it, diversification. People say, well, I've got to diversify. I need some F, I need some G, I need some... No, you're 30 years old, you need some C.
Yeah.
Because that's 500 companies.
You got 500 companies you're diversified
right.
across. And the G fund, a lot of people use for safety. I don't argue. It's really your only option while growing, right?
The L income's an option.
But it's really just G.
But it's mostly G anyway.
And C.
Yeah,
that's all
G.
it really is.
Yeah.
And so if you look through these things, it's something that we obviously sit down and talk with folks. Everybody's circumstances is a little bit different, so we got to say that. But I'd say most of you, if you could pay more attention to your contributions, how much are you saving and how much should you be saving? Like these questions, if we can get those things answered for you, not only do you start putting more away for retirement, you also start making the planning process a lot easier for yourself down the road.
Oh yeah, it just opens up the flexibility wide open.
You're living on a little bit less. You don't need as much as far as guaranteed income goes in retirement. You're able to maybe stay invested in the market a little bit down the road a little more. There's a lot of doors that get opened when you start really hammering down like what your true need is and saving enough for retirement, right? And so we all probably know that. We know that in our hearts and our souls, like we got to be saving more for retirement. These catch-up contribution limits are there.
Yeah.
I'd be taking advantage of them all day long if I was, especially when I had something like the TSP or the TSP Roth at my hands. That's another question, though. What do you see with TSP Roth right now? You see a lot of people investing in TSP Roth?
I see almost...
Or a lot of interest. I get a lot of interest all the time.
And it's sadly, I get a lot of interest out of like late 60s people that are leaving in the next couple of years, right? It's like, oh, okay. I should have done that Roth thing, right?
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
But at a certain point, right, you're kind of defeating the purpose because you're already pushing RMD age or whatever. But yeah, when I talk to anybody under 40, most folks are doing 100% Roth.
Yeah.
Which I think, I don't know. We don't know what taxes are going to be.
Well, think about tax cuts. I think it just got reapproved.
Did it get pushed? Yeah.
I think that's the idea, at least.
So think about that. In your 30s, you get 30 years of policy change, right? Like stuff's going to happen.
Up and down and all around.
We have no idea where taxes will be 30 years, and that puts a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old just in their 60s, hitting 70. What when you're 85, right? So the Roth, I'm always, I'm a tax-free guy. Like the more money you can have in the Roth, the better, because then you're just not subject to what the tax rates are.
taxes are lower right now. There's probably a few people watching that say, yeah, but down the road, I'm going to be living in a lower tax environment, and so I'll pay the taxes at this lower tax rate later on, and I'm making a lot of money right now. It'd be bad for me to pay all that tax money. I'd argue that the stats would say most people don't decrease their expenses for long in retirement. Doesn't take long, 4 or 5 years into retirement before you start to creep back up to the income tax levels that you were already at.
Right.
And then it did make sense to have Roth money.
That's the whole point of the RMD. I mean,
the
IRS is going to make
they're
you
going to
pull
force
the
you to
cash.
come out.
I've got people right now that are looking at $80,000 and $90,000 RMDs.
Jeez.
That puts him in another, not even keeping him in the one tax. It's going to push him into the next tax bracket.
Yep.
And they were already in the same tax bracket they were when they left.
But also too, like I find a lot of my clients coming to me and saying like, oh, well, we're going to cut back here because we don't want to do this thing because we're going to have to take more money out. And my CPA said it's going to bump me into the next bracket. So we're not going to take that trip this year. It's like, what kind of retirement is that? That's not the retirement you've dreamt of. It's like, yeah, I got to be mindful of my tax scenario. It's like good planning prevents those things from happening and allows you to enjoy your life, right? And maybe some people just don't care. Like so I bump up the tax bracket every once in a while. Okay, fine. But it's about what are your priorities? How close are you calling it between your retirement dollars? Like, is it going to be, dicey whether you're going to make it through retirement or not?
I think most people are okay paying taxes. Nobody's okay with paying taxes other than we all agree we need to for whatever reason. But at your working years, paying the taxes on what you're earning, to me, that's acceptable. Once I'm retired, to have to continue to pay those same, even if I got to pay a little less, I'd rather not if I don't have to on all of my income. Right?
No doubt. I mean,
just my opinion. But
I think people definitely become more cognizant of it in retirement.
Well, yeah, you feel every little change.
You feel every little change, and because like if taxes go up on say your pensions, your Social Security, things like that. Let's say those things go up. Now you're responsible. You and your advisor may be responsible to go get more money from your accounts. So you feel the burden of pooling money from the gap, and so if taxes go up and you need more money to live your lifestyle,
cover that tax.
You
see that account drop.
More. You have to. There's something about that pain of like, usually I take $10,000 a year out of my account, but now I have to take $12,000 out this year because of taxes going up, and you're like, gosh,
the market went down.
Taxes stink, man. I wish I hadn't paid more taxes.
The market went down 10% this year, so I really pulled like 22% out of money. It's like, oh man, no, I think just your question was, what do you think about Roth? I'm a believer. The earlier you can get some money in the Roth, whether it's all of your contributions or some of your contributions, at least get something to where you've got the flexibility of being able to manipulate the tax system at the point in time, right? If you're 65 years old and your pension and your Social Security keep you at a tax bracket, but you pull in your traditional TSP and it bumps you one, well, pull some from your Roth that year, right?
Right.
It just gives you the ability to dictate what taxes you pay. That's the cool thing.
And you're blessed with this account. Unlike a lot of folks, not everybody has a Roth account inside of their 401k plan or something like that. Not everybody has an option like that.
Yeah, no.
And so
I guess today, right? We talked about before we started this episode, we started talking about what potential changes might we see.
Yeah, I threw that in the notes. Like that's what I wanted to talk about.
Maybe we should actually think about that because people always ask, are they going to keep the Roth? I mean, how long? How do we know for sure that they can't say I'm going to pay
the getting's good. Tomorrow
right?
Could be different, no doubt. But I threw that in there because my initial thoughts when I started seeing like all the efficiency stuff, it's like, well, TSP has a lot of advantages. We talked about it. It's a great savings plan. Is the match going to stay the same? It's a really aggressive match, but compared to some of the 401k plans I see out there, true dollar for dollar match up to 5%. You guys may know that already. But that's aggressive compared to like most employers will require you to contribute 5 for them to give you 3. Right? And it's like, well, that's not as good. But if the government's talking about efficiency and money's being wasted, it's like we don't need this to be that much of an incentive for people to come work for the government. They could say something like that. And so the change might be up on the block.
Right.
The other thing that I threw that in there for was because of the, Trump's last administration. They were pretty dead set on stopping the I fund, the international
they were
fund.
wanting to change. Yeah,
they wanted to
TSP.
change it because of all the investments that were going into the I fund were going overseas, and they said, well, why is the government's 401k type plan or retirement plan investing in foreign nations
out of the country?
And so,
You
who
know,
knows if that'll change or not? I think some people like that exposure. So
yeah, but my opinion on the I, it's a dog fund. I mean, it's literally, if you look at today's and even over the last handful of years, the average since inception in 2001
yeah,
is 5%.
yeah, and you consider like the C fund is what over that
Over
same time
11.
period, over 11%.
And
So
C's been around since 1988,
right,
right? So,
much longer.
but you've got the most risky, if you think about international investing,
You're taking on a lot more risk for that return.
for the same average return as the F fund, 5%.
Yeah. So the F fund, if you don't know,
Bond.
is bonds, is a bond index fund. It's supposed to be safe, but you take on a ton of more risk and up and down and all around when you look at the I fund. Typically, you take on risk to get reward, right? There should be some years where this thing's just
through the
roof, and
but
it's
it
not been.
hasn't. Yeah,
And that, I think, is their exact point. Is like,
Yeah.
and so I'm not saying that they're going to come in and just slash and burn everything, but I'm saying we shouldn't just think that the TSP set and off the list of things that might get slashed or burned.
Yeah, I think
as far as
yeah,
some of the greatness of it,
No, I think there's a lot that the government and the Department of Government Efficiency can actually do that doesn't bother anybody, right? It literally improves all of our lives by
potentially
just doing little things that we're unnecessarily doing.
The other thing I'm thinking of as we're just sitting here is maybe they start actually doing something inside the TSP as far as retirement options, like what you can do to distribute it. Because right now, you don't have any good option as how you're going to take money out of this thing. It's you're left to your own devices, or you go with a really a poor annuity option,
outdated MetLife annuity
option, or you kind of you would set up like a systematic withdrawal, just kind of guessing. Again, I guess left to your own devices.
I call that the wing it method, right?
Wing it method, right? So you don't really have good options as far as how you're going to get this money out, and so maybe that's something they'll look at reframing. But right now, a lot of folks watching probably don't realize that. It's like you got this great savings plan, but then it's just you're on your own.
It's truly a thrift savings plan, and it was never geared to be the thrift spending plan.
Yeah.
Which I guess we really don't want them to fix that, because that's where we come in as FRCs, right?
Sure.
We really can help people make the best of that spending option. But yeah, who knows what they'll change. I mean, they've got to figure some things out agencies across the board are all probably spending a little bit of money, doing something a little inappropriately. So I don't know. You look at the whole efficiency process, and if they take a wide open look at it, I think they'll find some easy things to fix without really, like you said, ruffling any feathers or burning anything to the ground.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Definitely, absolutely. All right. Well, I think probably enough. We talked a ton about TSP.
Yeah.
When we come back, maybe next episode we can talk a little bit about some of the other benefits and see what's going on with that. And
I think folks just right now in this point in time need to take a look at your picture, your situation where you're at. You've all got a target. I say you have to have a target to shoot for, and if you're off track somehow, go back and look at what you're doing. How much you're putting into the thrift. What are your benefits going to look like at the point of retirement, and just have a look. Take a look, talk to an FRC, and just see if you're on track, right?
And if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty about how these benefits go, I'm serious about what we were saying before. Every one of you that are watching this, I want to make sure you get an invite to one of our classes. Come and join us. Watch one of the classes. It could be a really great option for you to learn about these benefits, how they work, and our real opinions on what to do in retirement. And then if you still have questions beyond that, we always have an opportunity to sit down and chat. All right. Well, hey, thanks for being here. We'll see you guys next time. Take care.